So today we're diving deep into some fascinating stuff.
Hmm.
It's all about the future of the Church of Scotland. And, I've been looking through these reports, and honestly, it's got me wondering, like, what if they just hit the reset button? Start it over. You know what I mean? Like, completely wound things down and then launched a totally fresh Christian mission in Scotland.
Oh, wow, that's a pretty radical idea. I mean, it really makes you think about, what the church's purpose even is in this day and age.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got all these reports here from the Church of Scotland's General Assembly. They
Yeah.
span from like 2015 to 2023. And going through them, it's like, one of those slow motion dramas. And what really stuck out to me right off the bat was the decline in membership. And we're not
Yeah.
talking about a little dip here. It's like a constant downward trend.
Yeah, that's not unique to the Church of Scotland, of course. Lots of established churches are seeing the same thing. But it does make you wonder, like, what's at the root of it all? Is it just, people changing, demographics shifting? Or is it something deeper, like a mismatch between what the church offers and what people are actually looking for in their lives these days?
Yeah, it's almost like, they're trying to squeeze a square peg into a round hole,
Yeah.
holding on to the old ways when the world's moving on.
It's that tension between tradition and relevance, right? Trying to, stay true to your roots while also staying, well, relevant. It's a tough balancing act.
It is, and these numbers don't lie. Look, in 2019, they had over 20,000 people leaving, officially removed from the rolls, compared to just under 7,000 new members. So it's a pretty big gap, right? And it makes you think, if people aren't finding what they're looking for in the church, where are they going? Like, what else is out there that's drawing them in?
Yeah, what are those unmet needs, right? What's missing? It's not about, judging anyone's choices, but it's about understanding them.
Exactly. And of course, fewer members means less money, right?
Right.
And that's where things get even more interesting. These reports, they paint a pretty clear picture of the financial pressure the church is under. I mean, we're talking operating deficits, debates about how they're investing their money, even talk of selling off property just to, stay afloat.
It almost makes you wonder if there's a bigger problem there, like, is it a generational thing? Are younger people just not as into, I don't know, donating? Or maybe it's the cost of keeping these big old buildings running, It's probably a whole bunch of things tangled up together.
It is, and then there's this whole debate about the Church of Scotland Investors Trust and their investments. Get this, they're invested in oil and gas companies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
No.
I know, right? And in 2021, they did start pulling back from those investments, but they said it was like purely a financial decision, nothing to do with, ethics or anything.
That's interesting. So it's like, on one hand, they have to be smart with their money, fiduciary responsibility and all that. But then there's the whole moral question, right? Like, should a church be profiting from, well, industries that a lot of people see as harmful to the environment?
Exactly. Can you really separate those things, money and ethics, especially when we're talking about something as big as climate change? It's a tough one.
It really is. I mean, there are valid points on both sides of that argument. What matters is that they're, talking about it openly and honestly, and that whatever decisions they make, people understand why.
Totally. And it's like walking a tightrope, right? One wrong step and, you're going to get criticized no matter what you do.
That's leadership for you, right? Tough choices.
So we've got shrinking membership, money problems, and then to top it all off, these reports dive into the bureaucracy. I'm telling you, it's mind-boggling. Even simple things like appointing a new minister or, selling one of those buildings we talked about. It's like this insane obstacle course of rules and regulations.
And, those rules probably made sense at some point, right? Someone thought they were a good idea, like keeping things organized, fair. But then, time goes by, more rules get added, and all of a sudden it's like this giant web that's, trapping them.
Totally. It's like building a house with so many security systems that you end up like, trapped inside.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? At what point does being organized turn into being, well, inflexible? Like, how do you balance structure with being able to, move with the times?
It's a tough one. And it makes me wonder, is all this bureaucracy actually turning people away? Like potential ministers who are like, forget this, it's too much hassle. Or even current members who are just, tired of all the red tape.
Yeah, it's a real possibility. I mean, people want things to be easy, streamlined, right? If it seems like too much effort, well, there are plenty of other options out there.
Right. I mean, think about it. If you're looking for community, there are book clubs, hiking groups. If you're looking for, spiritual stuff, there are podcasts, online courses, all sorts of things. The church isn't the only game in town anymore.
Exactly. They need to like up their game, you know?
Yeah.
Offer something that you can't get anywhere else, something that really speaks to people authentically and meets them where they're at, you know, with the issues they're actually facing today.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got declining numbers, we've got money troubles, we've got bureaucracy out the wazoo. Kind of sounds bleak, right? But there is a silver lining. These reports also highlight some new stuff the church is trying, like new initiatives, outreach programs. It's like they're trying to, step outside their comfort zone and engage with the world in a different way.
Yeah, let's dig into those. It'll be interesting to see how they're trying to bridge that gap.
Okay, so one that really stood out to me is this thing called the Scottish Church Leaders Forum. They started it in 2020, and it brings together like leaders from different Christian denominations, even other faith groups sometimes, and they tackle these big issues like the war in Ukraine, drug policy. They even talk about the future of, get this, Scottish ecumenism.
Scottish ecumenism. Okay, now that's a new one. I have to admit, I don't know what that means.
Me neither. I had to look it up. Basically, it's all about, different Christian denominations in Scotland working together, being more unified, which, considering their history, is a pretty big deal.
It is, and it kind of shows they're realizing, you know, that they can't just be in their own little bubble. Like, the world's got big problems and they need to be part of the solution.
Exactly. It's like they're finally realizing that faith isn't just about what happens inside a church building, right? It's about how you live in the world, how you treat people.
And that's a message that speaks to everyone, I think.
It does. So this forum, they're not just talking the talk. They're involved in all sorts of things, like advocating for policies to help people in poverty, speaking out against racism. They even organize events to bring different faith communities together.
Those are all good things. It shows they're willing to get their hands dirty, you know?
Right.
Be out there in the real world trying to make a difference.
It's like they're putting their faith into action.
Right.
Not just talking about loving your neighbor, but actually doing it.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder if this kind of outward focus, helping people, could be what brings the church back to life, in a way.
Maybe so. People are drawn to those who are actually doing something positive in the world, you know, making a real difference. And the church, they have the resources, the people, to do a lot of good.
They do. But, the big question is it enough? Or, are they just putting a Band-Aid on a bigger problem?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's something we'll have to keep exploring. Because whether they should start over or not, it's complicated.
It is. It really makes you think about the nature of faith itself. What it means to be part of a religious institution where spirituality fits in with everything else going on in the world.
Big questions.
Big questions indeed. And I think those are the perfect questions to leave our listeners with as we get ready for the next part of our deep dive. Next time, we're going to dig even deeper into those arguments for and against a complete transformation of the Church of Scotland.
Can't wait. You know, going through these reports, one thing that keeps hitting me is how complicated the Church of Scotland's structure is. It's like they have a rule for everything.
Oh, tell me about it. Remember all those regulations we talked about? I mean, they even had to make rules about legal aid in disciplinary proceedings back in 2018.
Right. And I get it. Guidelines are important, accountability. But it makes you think, is all this red tape actually stopping them from, keeping up with the times, meeting people's needs?
It's like they're trying to steer a cruise ship with a tiny little steering wheel. Like, you'll get there eventually, but it's going to be slow and painful.
And these days, nobody wants slow, right? Everyone's used to instant everything. If the church seems like it's stuck in the past, slow-moving, bureaucratic, well, it's going to be tough to attract new people, especially younger folks.
Totally. It's like trying to compete with streaming services by offering, those old videotapes. Nobody wants those anymore. Times have changed.
They have. And that brings us back to that big question we started with, about a fresh start. Could hitting the reset button actually be the best way to deal with all these problems?
It's definitely a radical idea, but sometimes, you need a radical solution. Like, imagine a house with a cracked foundation. You can keep patching it up, but at some point, you have to think about rebuilding the whole thing.
That's a good analogy. Because we're not talking about just rearranging the furniture. We're talking about a whole new way of thinking, reimagining what the church could even be in this day and age.
So let's say, just for fun, that they do decide to start over. What would be the good things about that? What could they gain?
Well, for one, they wouldn't be dragging around all that, historical baggage, both literally and figuratively. They could free themselves from those expensive old buildings, all those complicated systems they have. It'd be like a clean slate.
Like cleaning out your closet, get rid of the junk, make room for new stuff.
Exactly. And that space could be filled with new ideas, new ways of doing things, a chance to really focus on what's important, the core mission of the church, trying new things, connecting with people in different
It's
ways.
like having a blank canvas,
Yeah.
right? And say, okay, what do we want to create here?
Exactly. And that freedom to create, I think it could bring a lot of energy, a lot of excitement back to the church.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate here. What about the bad stuff? What are the risks of doing something this drastic?
Well, one big one is, losing that connection to the past. The Church of Scotland has a long history,
Hmm.
and all those buildings, traditions, they're part of Scotland's story. Starting over could feel like, erasing that history.
Yeah, it's like tearing down your grandparents' house. Even if it's, falling apart, there are memories there, a connection to the past.
And there's the risk of, upsetting people. Some people might feel really attached to the way things are, and a change this big could really alienate them. It could even cause, arguments and conflict.
So it's not a simple decision, that's for sure. There's a lot to consider. And at the end of the day, it's the members of the church who have to decide, right, weigh the good against the bad.
Absolutely. And they need to do it carefully, There are no easy answers here. It's about listening, learning, and trying to figure out what's truly best.
It's like setting off on one of those pilgrimages. You might not know exactly where you're going to end up, but you hope the journey itself will, change you for the better.
That's a good way to put it. And speaking of journeys, let's talk about some of the good things the church is doing already. We talked about that Leaders Forum and their work on those big issues. But there's also that refugee coordination project. I found that one really interesting.
Oh, yeah, me too. They're really putting in the effort to help refugees, going above and beyond, it seems like.
It's not just about meeting those immediate needs, food and shelter. They're actually trying to help them become part of Scottish society. That's a long-term commitment.
And it's not just about money, right? It's about making them feel welcome, making them feel like they belong.
Exactly. And that's where the church can really shine, They've got the people, the connections to build those bridges.
It's like they're connecting people from all over the world, bringing them together.
And that's a beautiful thing, right? Because it's about community. It's about caring for others.
It reminds us that even with all these problems we've been talking about, there's still a lot of good happening.
There is. And that's why, I don't think the Church of Scotland is a lost cause. Yeah, they have challenges, but they can also do amazing things. It's about finding a way to, unlock that potential.
And maybe, just maybe, it's about finding that balance, holding on to the good stuff from the past while also being open to change, to new ways of doing things.
It's a balancing act. But it's worth trying, because what's at stake here, it's not just about the Church of Scotland. It's about the future of faith, the future of community.
Okay, so here we are, the final part of our deep dive. And that big question, it's still hanging over us, isn't it? Is it really time for the Church of Scotland to press that, reset button?
Yeah, it's something I've been thinking about a lot as we've been talking. And honestly, I don't think there's a clear-cut answer. There are good reasons on both sides of the argument,
For sure. On the one hand, you've got all that history, right? The church is so deeply woven into the fabric of Scotland, the buildings, the traditions. It's hard to imagine it just disappearing.
Yeah, it would be like, I don't know, like cutting down a really old tree, one that's been there forever. You'd lose so much more than just the tree itself, right? The shade it gave, the birds that nested in it, that sense of, connection to the past.
But then on the other hand, what if that tree is, I don't know, dying, losing its leaves, the branches getting weaker? What if it's just not able to adapt to the way things are now?
And you can't just, keep propping it up forever. At some point, you have to think about planting something new, something that can actually thrive.
So what do? Do you try to hold on to that old tree, even though it's fading? Or, I don't know, do you make that tough call, let it go, and plant a new seed in its place?
That's the tough question, isn't it? And it's not just churches that are dealing with this. It's everything. Schools, businesses, you name it. We're living in a time where things are changing so fast, and the old ways, well, they just don't work anymore.
So how do you even know when it's time to, let go? What are the signs that something's just beyond repair?
Well, I think one of the biggest signs is when it's not relevant anymore, when it's not meeting people's needs, When it's seen as out of touch, behind the times, that's a pretty clear sign that something has to change.
And looking at these reports, we've seen those signs, haven't we? Fewer members, financial problems, that whole bureaucracy thing. It does feel like the church is struggling to keep up with the world.
It does, and they're trying, right? Like with that Leaders Forum, the Refugee Project. But is it enough? Or is it time for something much bigger?
So let's imagine, just for a minute, that they do decide to start over. What would that even look like? How do you build a new, more effective Christian mission in Scotland?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is listen. Really listen to what people in Scotland want and need. What are their spiritual needs, their hopes? How do they see faith fitting into their lives?
Like, taking a survey, figuring out what the landscape is before you start planting anything new.
Exactly. And you have to listen to everyone, not just people who are already in the church. You have to talk to those who left, those who never joined in the first place. You need the whole picture.
So it's about starting from scratch, building something new based on what people actually want, not what, some committee decides.
Right. And once you know what people need, you can start figuring out how to meet those needs.
So what would that look like? Would it be a traditional church or something, I don't know, more modern?
I think it would have to be something totally new, something that breaks free from all those old rules and structures. Maybe it's a network of smaller communities, each with its own thing going on, but all connected by those core Christian values.
Oh, like a bunch of stars, all shining their own light, but together they make this amazing constellation.
I like that. It would be vibrant, diverse, something that speaks to people right where they are.
It's a beautiful idea, but it's also kind of, I don't know, scary. Like, you'd have to let go of so much, be open to the unknown.
It takes a leap of faith, definitely.
Right.
But sometimes those leaps, they lead to amazing things.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think that's what I want our listeners to think about. Change is happening, whether we like it or not. But transformation, that's a choice. It's choosing to let go of the old, to embrace the new, to step into a future that, could be amazing.
Who knows, maybe in letting go, we find something even better, something that connects us more deeply to each other and to, something bigger than ourselves.
Thanks for listening.
Put your comments below.